edition of the Gateway Gospel program. I am interviewing, in my first ever interview, Jonathan Feldstein. Jonathan is the president of the Genesis 123 Foundation. We do a lot of work with Jonathan in Israel. He's also the host of Inspirations from Zion podcast with Charisma. He's a syndicated author and columnist and a personal friend of mine. But right now, all that aside, he's a father and a grandfather that lives in Israel and has two sons in the IDF and his entire family there. And he has been personally impacted by this tragedy, as all Israelis have. And Jonathan, welcome to our program, and it's a delight to have you.
First of all, thank you. I get the privilege of being your first interviewee, but it's always a pleasure to be with you and connected to you and your family personally and your broader church and ministry.
Yeah, Jonathan and I first met, and we became friends pretty quick. And
in the first half hour.
Yeah, in the first half hour, and we've done some interesting things together. Our church has been a supporter of his foundation. Of course, he's been a supporter of our church. For those of you watching, he's actually been to the school on Purim and talked to our kids about that special feast in Israel and celebrated it with us. And that was a unique, dynamic way for the kids to learn about that festival. And that was a joyous circumstance to have Jonathan and I to be together. Unfortunately, this is not a joyous circumstance that brings us. It's tragic and just absolutely mind-blowing, the level of barbarity that's happened in Israel to our precious Jewish brethren. And we're just, our thoughts are with you and the entire nation in prayer. And I do want to make this clear. Jonathan is an Orthodox Jew, and there's a lot of things that we disagree on, but one thing that I'm certainly agree on is the one that keepeth Israel. He neither slumbers nor he sleeps. And Israel is still firmly in the hands of God. So, Jonathan, I think it would be good to give our listeners and viewers some context as to where you live in Israel, its relationship to where Gaza would be and where Jerusalem is, so people can have a further understanding of where you were at and what's going on.
Yeah, and that's important geographically for a variety of reasons. So we live in a town called Efrat, which is biblical. Oh dear, why am I blanking? Rachel was buried on the road to Bethlehem, which is Ephrat, I think is how the scripture goes. And Boaz courted Ruth in the fields of Ephrat and went to the elders and of Bethlehem, and their blessing was that they should live and prosper in Ephrat. We are just south of Jerusalem. I can see from my seventh floor balcony, I can see Jerusalem 12 kilometers to the north of us. And in the house we lived in 3 years ago, we saw Bethlehem across the valley, which means we're that close to Bethlehem as well. Now, so we're basically a suburb of Jerusalem, and we have all the horrible traffic that goes along with that, getting in and out of Jerusalem during rush hour. Having said that, we are also 40 miles as the crow flies to the east, north and east a little bit of the northeasternmost corner of the Gaza Strip. And why that's significant is because this week, I think with the exception of today when we're having this conversation, every day we have been sent to the bomb shelters at least twice. On Saturday when this war started, I think it was 4 times, but honestly, we were living in a blur. And that means that number one, the terrorists the Hamas Islamic terrorists in Gaza have rockets that can reach at least 45 or 50 miles because they're not firing from straight on the border, and that they use them. And there have been many. And each time we've been sent to the bomb shelter, I don't know how much I'm sure you know. I don't know how much the viewers know in terms of the Iron Dome system. It's fascinating, but it tracks the trajectory of every rocket that's launched and will calculate where it's going to land. And if it's going to land in an open area, it lets it land. If it's going to land in a populated area, it shoots it down. So every time we have an air raid siren, that's just for rockets that are incoming to our specific part of Israel, the populated area. And inevitably, we hear an explosion right over our head. And sometimes it's loud enough that the echo will shake the building after the explosion itself. We should, I don't know, 40, 50 miles from where you're sitting, but people can imagine that's a good distance.
Absolutely.
And these are not even the most long range rockets that they possess. We have been suffering, but we have not been suffering anything close to what communities much nearer the Gaza Strip and to the north along the coast have been suffering. Things have been so bad here. Usually we count how many rockets, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 rockets in one period of time. I have seen no reports as to how many rockets because that's incidental. Right now we're counting casualties.
It's mind-blowing. So you're within 40 miles of the Gaza Strip.
Correct.
Still, you and your family are under the threat of a possible rocket attack as far away as Bethlehem and Jerusalem.
Jerusalem's having even more. Yeah.
They're having even more. Wow. What's the northernmost point, Jonathan, from the Gaza Strip? If you understand Israel, and I know many people that are watching this or will watch this will understand it. Gaza's in the very southern portion of Israel, shares a border with Egypt.
Correct.
So their range is seemingly kind of increasing out there. What's the northernmost point that you know of from the Gaza Strip that's been hit with a rocket?
I don't know about hit, but under threat and rockets reaching. I know certainly suburbs and separate cities north of Tel Aviv. The airport is technically south of Tel Aviv, so certainly the airport is in range. A large city in the middle in between, Modi'in, has about 100,000 residents, is in range. I'm not sure how far. There was something, and I'm just blanking on which community it was, but there was something recently that I would guess is probably another at least 20 or 30 miles north of Tel Aviv. It was actually an Arab community. You know this. I have an app on my phone that shows every time. Matter of fact, I should turn the phone on so in case while we're having the conversation, you can hear the alert. We see where the rockets are going. When we're watching TV, you see a ticker listing all of the cities and people where people need to go take shelter. I noticed a city that's at least 20 or 30 miles north of Tel Aviv that's an Arab community sometime this week. So they've got them. They've definitely got them.
So they have rockets essentially hitting between Tel Aviv and Haifa, which is in the north.
Around there, yeah, around there. That's a good measure.
I mean, for those of you for the people that are watching, of course, I've been there. The people that have been to Israel, they will really get a grip of how significant that is. That many people are under threat, and as you just mentioned.
Oh yeah.
That's not even the longest range rockets.
No, the longest range rockets are up in Lebanon. But by the way, in terms of total number of people, I would say that somewhere in the range of half our population is in range. Wow. And has had at one point or another this week rockets. You'll come and visit. I'm in my son's room because my grandchildren came to move in, my daughter, my grandchildren, and we'll talk about that. They came to move in for the weekend. So they're in my office right now, but I'm in my son's room. The wall I'm pointing to is to the west. The window, if I were to look out here and if I were to see an alarm on my phone, I can open up the window, and without any magnification, I can see the rockets being launched from Gaza, and I can see the Iron Dome shooting them down along the coast.
Oh wow. That's insane. Almost as
40 miles, 40, 50 miles away. Yes.
to suggest where your grandchildren are asleep right now that's a possibility of rockets going off. And America,
Absolutely.
we in America, we've never really had to experience that in the way that you all are experiencing it. But I want the app that you spoke about is called Red Alert.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. Correct.
I have it on my iPad at home. If anybody,
Yeah.
it's not just for Israelis. If anybody wants to download that app store, you can download it, and you can get immediate real-time updates.
Yeah.
Of course, the time shift, you might not want to leave your phone next to your nightstand, but I've had it for a long time. I look at it and it reminds me to pray.
Yes.
And, ask for the safety and peace of
yes.
Jewish people in Israel.
And you can see where the rockets are going. You can pray for the residents of those specific cities.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So as hard as this is to do, Jonathan, and I know you're willing to do it, take us to where you're at, as you described, where you live in Israel, to October the 7th. How did you find out? What notifications were giving? What was your response right after?
So October 7th was a Saturday, Shabbat. We're as you noted, I'm Orthodox Jew. That means we don't do any labor, and there's a whole lot. We can have a whole long conversation about what kind of work we don't do. But it means we're offline. It means that my phone's not on, my computer's not on, my TV's not on. Nobody owns a radio anymore. But if we had a radio, that wouldn't be on. We're unplugged. We're spending a day with our family in our synagogue, praying, fellowship, eating a lot of food, and trying to sneak in a nap in the afternoon because it's the only day that I can. It's a day of rest, and it's the only day I really can. We got home. It was also the festival, the end of Sukkot, and that's one of the biblical festivals. So we got home really late on Friday night from my daughter's house. They live here, a 40-minute walk. We don't drive, and that's significant. So we walked 40 minutes to come home, got home and went to bed around 1:30, I don't know. And our worship that morning, it's a long service that morning because of the festival. It's about 3-4 hours. And I knew that I needed my sleep. And well, by the way, I don't even set an alarm clock. So it's all naturally waking up or not. And I overslept. My alarm clock Saturday morning was an air raid siren, 50 yards across the street, and it's loud. It jolted my wife and I out of bed. We have a 2-story apartment. 2 of our kids were home. They all heard it, and we all met downstairs here in my oldest son's bedroom, which serves as our bomb shelter. It's got different construction, all new Israeli construction for the last 10, maybe even 20 years or more, have bomb shelters that are standards required. Personally, I don't know how effective it'll be if our building takes a direct hit, but hopefully we'll never know about that. And that woke us up. And because also we don't use light, lights are on timers, we didn't have a light in my son's bedroom. So you have these big steel plates that cover up the window, and the room is pitch black, which made it all the more eerie. We heard an explosion. You're supposed to wait 10 minutes. My daughter criticized me for not waiting 10 minutes because I was just antsy and I wanted to know what was going on. I wanted to see out the window, and I went upstairs to look out the window. At least 3 more times that morning. That was at 9 o'clock. So in the course of the next 3 hours, we were sent down to the bomb shelter 3 more times, to the point that my youngest son was so fed up, and people who have teenage sons can relate to this, with his sleep being interrupted, that he decided he was going to go back to sleep in my oldest son's bed so that if there was a siren, he didn't have to move, which is a lovely adolescent when what's going on. And had it been something that we perceived that was life-threatening, at least for us, we didn't do that. But we spent a lot of times speculating. We knew, which is being us. I thought that maybe we had gone in and taken out some major Hamas terror leader, and my wife had an idea. My kid, it was a fascinating speculation that if it was a TV reality show, you'd even get some laughs out of retroactively. Well, the day progressed, and because we live in a community that's probably 95% or more Orthodox, there are very few cars on the road on a Saturday. But this last Saturday, there were a lot of cars on the road. And we noticed that they were being driven by young men wearing their uniforms. So we knew that there was a call up, and we knew that my son-in-law would have been one of the first called up because of his position. It involves intelligence and strategy, and he's not on the front line. He's more in a command kind of position. And we were right, by the way. He was one of the first called up. Matter of fact, he took our car, and it's still down on his base. And because it's a closed military area, we can't even get our car back. That's just sort of a little bit of humor in this situation. We didn't know what was really going on until 4 p.m. when my son came in, the one who just got married in July, so just almost 3.5 months. He's a newlywed still. He came in. He assumed that we knew what was going on, but we didn't, and briefed us very quickly about the cross-border infiltration, about terrorists coming in, overrunning Israeli communities. I don't remember if he had given any indication about casualties, but I seem to remember he was talking about more than 100, which is kind of ironic now, considering that we're up over 1,300, and someone I just did a webinar with, a military expert, believes that we're not even close to what the actual death count will be. He packed up, he got in his uniform, he packed up his gear that he keeps at home. We packed up some non-perishable food, and he was out of the house within 10 minutes. And as he was leaving, he said, "Oh shoot, I forgot my good socks at home," where he's living in his in-laws' house now, who are friends and neighbors of ours. And 10 minutes, and he went downstairs, and I went over, looked over the balcony, and 2 minutes later, a big black car came, picked him up, and zipped him off. And we didn't know. That's all we knew. We didn't leave the house until Saturday night when Shabbat ended. Then we started to realize what the carnage was.
On my end, just a second ago, Jonathan, you broke up just for a moment. So we want to maybe just clarify. You were at home. You were awoken from sound, air raid siren. You're back and forth between bomb shelters for many hours through the night. And then your son comes in and says, "I've been called up. I have to go." Your son-in-law says, "Hey, I got to go. I need the car." He was your son-in-law was one of the first few people called up because of his job, which you can't discuss,
right?
Because it's in intelligence. And I want to give the listeners a little bit of perspective. The age of your son-in-law is, how old is your son-in-law?
He's 32.
Okay. And then your son?
25.
And his job in the IDF, I know it, but I want you to.
He's a paratrooper. He's a combat soldier. He's trained for ground incursions.
And an officer as well.
I don't know that he's considered an officer, but he's not a grunt either.
Yeah. So the point?
He's a sergeant. He's a sergeant.
He's a sergeant. So the point I'm trying to get across to our listeners is this: you have basically two sons that have been called up and sent to a combat zone, which is not very far from where you live, which is the crazy thing. I was talking to a family member of mine that's been deployed overseas. He said, "I can't imagine what it is to be deployed, so close to where your family's at." He goes, "That's a whole new level of, just understanding and operational, details that you would just have to factor in." But the point I'm trying to get across is you have two sons, and they're not in this war, and Israel is at war.
Right.
They're not going to be pencil pushers. They're not going to be behind a desk. They're going to be in the action, and they all need our prayers that they can do their duty. And we know that they'll bring honor to your family, and we know that they'll bring honor to themselves, and we know that they'll bring honor to their nation and honor to God. And your son and son-in-law, I'm sure, like a lot of our soldiers, they're not, bloodthirsty, psychopathic killers,
No,
but they have a job to do to defend their people and their
correct.
nation, and they will do their job. And we're going to pray for them as they do their job. But you just talked a little bit about your situation, but personal response in your family. Can you give us like a broader picture of the national response altogether that's going on right now?
So I've been writing a lot of articles. If anyone wants to Google Jonathan Feldstein and townhall.com, most of my articles are getting posted there, but they're getting posted to a lot of other sites. In one of my articles this week, I wrote about how we're angry, we're fearful, and we're grieving. And those are all different emotions, but they're all overlaid. And yet, we're strong and we're encouraged. And I want to tell you, there are so many ways. We've been bludgeoned. This is the worst attack on Israel, certainly in 50 years. But the response has been overwhelming. The army initially called up 300,000 people. I didn't say that out at the outset because I didn't know it was public. It's public. But what's also public now is that as many as 360, I heard 400,000 showed up.
I saw that.
Right? It's extraordinary. And there are still young Israelis who have been traveling around the world who are trying to get home to join their units. This is a national tragedy and is a national rallying point. I'm pleased about the various social and political problems we've had this year. I'm pleased that finally this week we've formed at least a temporary wartime national unity government, and that everyone's focused on the same thing, on the military outcome of this operation. But having said all that, the roads are. I'm living here almost 20 years. I lived through the Second Lebanon War. I've lived through Operation Protective Shield and Protective Edge and Iron Pillar of Cloud, and I mean, there's so many. I lose track of them. Really, I can't even keep track. I've never seen the country this feeling like we're at war. The streets are empty. The roads are empty. I happened to bump into went through a mall to get to a grocery store the other day. The mall was empty. There was nothing open. Physically was open, but the stores were not. Christian friends who run a ministry here came to visit the other day. Their offices at the central bus station in Jerusalem. They said it's like a ghost town there. My third daughter, who works, I won't say where here in Jerusalem, but a major tourist place, just told me today that she's been laid off because there's no one coming. They're just laying people off. My other daughter, my second daughter, hasn't got. None of my daughters have gone back to work. My daughter, who's a physical therapist, who has 3 children, hasn't gone back to work. The children haven't gone back to school, and because of the month long of holidays, they haven't been in school in 3 weeks. My grandson said to my daughter today, when is he going to get, my oldest, when is he going to get to go back to kindergarten? So people are feeling it very profoundly. There's this great sense of unity. The unity that if we could bottle, we could sell it. It's unbelievable. But it's still overlaid with that fear, with the anger, and with the grief, because we're just now starting to bury the initial 1,300 that we know who've been killed. And there's so many that there have been calls out for people to volunteer to dig graves. Think of that.
It's unfathomable.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you had been there and you said the worst attack in 50 years. And of course, you're referring back to the Yom Kippur War of 1973. Correct. But Jonathan, I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but I have read to some extent about those conflicts and battles. Having been to Israel and saw some of the battlefields, especially in the north, and even some of the remnants of tanks and military equipment that is left, as a reminder to future generations. And I thought that was brilliant that Israel did that. And you
Yes.
go in the bunkers where they were at, but this is so much different because those conflicts were symmetrical wars, meaning
Yes.
you had troop on troop, tank on tank, armor on armor, and it was soldiers killing soldiers. Now, obviously, some civilian life was lost, possibly a lot, and even innocent life. But this attack, what makes it different than any war in modern Israel, is that it was strictly confined to the civilian population. Now, I know a lot of the military, there's 217 IDF members, the last I looked, that have been killed in action.
Yeah.
But that was not primarily their objective.
No.
Their objective was just pure barbarism. So, and for our listeners, Jonathan is, and you said Sukkot, that's the Feast of Tabernacles.
Correct.
That's what we would call it. So it's a major holiday for Israel. It's a major holiday for us. I mean, it's incredible. You know, when God dwelt among his people through Moses. You're coming to the end of this major holiday in the year 2023. And then all of a sudden, we're transported back to the 10th and 11th century of just pure barbarians, naked aggression against the elderly, against women. Women have been raped, and just children have been killed.
Children been killed, and they found bodies of 40 babies, some of which were beheaded.
Very difficult as a father to think about that. And I'm sorry.
No.
It's not something that civilized people that hold their family dear and love God would ever want to discuss. Children being burned to death and children being decapitated. It's not a good thing to even say, really. I never thought that we would talk about that in all the conversations that we've held, but we are, unfortunately. One thing that I think we all need to pray for is like for your son and son-in-law, and of course now hundreds of thousands of others, young men and women, is that God protects their minds. Because really that level of violence, especially against children, most people have never experienced that. Even in the modern battle spaces in our country, they haven't experienced that. And it's a terrible thing to experience. So that's kind of where we're all at. And this has just been atrocious. And I honestly feel, Jonathan, the Prime Minister Netanyahu said today, every member of Hamas is a dead man. And I think that needs to be the case. And I hope that happens, and we pray for that operation, that it's successful.
Well, can I add something to that?
Yes.
That's really important, and that does need to be our operation. The challenge, of course, which is what comes afterward. Who takes responsibility for Gaza, number one, and number two, it's correct and wonderful that left and right in America are united and see the barbarism and are standing squarely with Israel. And we're seeing that among world leaders. Today I saw a graphic of 40 countries whose nationals have been killed or missing here. It's not just Israelis. But here's the problem. When we continue this military operation and to destroy Hamas, there will necessarily be many Palestinian Arab civilian casualties, not because we're trying to do that, but because the terrorists embed themselves among the civilian population. Their bunkers are under hospitals. Their weapon storage are in mosques and schools and UN facilities. So when we go and hit them, sadly, and this is, by the way, if anyone wants to listen to a great conversation on military ethics, I just recorded it. It's going to be out on the Genesis 123 platforms shortly with a rabbi here and a military expert. It was fascinating. But as soon as the world gets uncomfortable with how much Arab blood is spilled, and I don't say that lightly, I don't seek that. No one does. Then we're going to start to see pressure on Israel that's, oh, your response is now disproportionate, or we'd have quiet on both sides. Now, I don't know. What is a proportionate response? Is a proportionate response to go and decapitate their children? Is that okay? So I want to ask people also to pray that the leaders around the world stand resolutely for as long as this operation needs to take. We're going to bear the brunt of it. It's our sons and daughters who are going to die. But we need to be able to go in and root out this evil. And it's local here in Hamas, but the common enemy we have is Iran. And that's where it starts.
They have been the largest state sponsor of terrorism over the past 60, 50, since the Islamic Revolution.
45 years.
And I want everybody to be aware of something. The same people that were perpetrating this attack in Gaza, which are the Iranians, were the same people that when we were in Iraq, and whether you agree with that or not, whether it was right or wrong, that's a separate discussion. Those were the same agents of chaos and carnage that were teaching the Iraqis and the guerrilla fighters in this bloody Islamic civil war how to make roadside bombs and kill my brothers, our sons. So when you said we have a common enemy, we do have a common enemy. And a lot of people in America have become so prohibited about war. And the narratives that you see kind of coming out now is how many wars do we need at one time? We have seen how far they are prepared to go. And if Americans sit back and think they don't want to do this in America, then you're wrong.
Correct.
We're the great Satan and you're the little Satan.
Correct.
Literally, when I say that, that's how their clerics and some of their more radical imams have described America and Israel. And I don't want to characterize everybody and put them under the umbrella that they're Iranians. That wouldn't be a fair thing or a fair assessment to do whatsoever. But it's obviously a problem. And we all can, talk about how we feel, politically about it. But what we've seen right now is just, it's unconscionable, the level of violence that they were prepared to go to.
Correct.
And the things that they were doing. And you talked about your interview that you did. People can check that out on YouTube, correct? Genesis 1.
It's a Genesis 123 YouTube. It's not up yet because we just did it, but it will be. And on our Facebook and Instagram, and if anyone wants to reach out to me personally, it's a very important conversation on an academic basis, but it's a much more important conversation to empower and embolden those who stand with Israel in the days and weeks that are coming, and we will see, I believe, I pray I'm wrong, an erosion of support and more global criticism of Israel. I mean, we already saw on day one Israel being blamed for having 1,300 people so far being butchered. I mean, if someone can think that, then they can think anything else that's obscene.
And I agree with. I hope you're wrong as well, Jonathan, but I agree with everything. I agree with everything you just said. You will see an erosion of support, and usually it will work its way from east to west. First, it will be the European countries, and then it will start to be and I hate to say this, more and more people on the left in America, and some of the people on the far right, even in America, that have anti-Semitism in their heart. And I want to be fair when I say that, because I've heard some of their rhetoric and saw some of the narratives that even some on the far right are spewing out. But one thing we all need to be aware of: as long as America, big and strong, stands behind Israel, Israel will be okay. And if people don't think that right now these other nations that surround Israel, that it's not keeping them in check from expanding this conflict, that we have the most modern death machines that have ever been invented by man that are floating out there in the Mediterranean Sea, our aircraft carriers, with almost unlimited power. And of course, that's what you see above the water that America's Navy has. And you don't know what's below the water that America's Navy has in the region. And I have someone very close to me in the Navy, and I asked him, I said, what's the capabilities of those aircraft carriers? And he said, well, they're civilization destroyers if we wanted them to be. And that's not what we want, obviously, but I mean, it keeps everything.
Well, go to our conversation about biblical ethics and war, and this is an all-out war. It's an existential war. It's not just a localized butchering of 1,300 Israelis. This is a war that if someone stands and holds a gun to your head and says, "I'm going to kill you," you have to believe them, and that's starting in Iran. And I'm comforted having an aircraft carrier on our shores, because Iran, pun intended, Iran needs to have its come to Jesus moment. And we need to support the Iranians, who are fed up with their evil leaders, and who are now, a dear friend of mine is an Iranian who became a Christian in Iran, sentenced to death. We got to get her to come to your church. Sure. She was sharing with me today or yesterday things that are coming out on Iranian social media, where Iranians are begging Israel to destroy Gaza, because for all of these decades, they've been fed the lies of Israel being the perpetrator of evil, and Iran spending so much money to support the terrorists. The Iranians are sick of it. If we go in, yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, Jonathan. I saw a video of an Iranian soccer game.
Yes.
Where they displayed Palestinian flags.
Yes.
Iranian people, 50, 60,000 Iranian
people. Don't repeat what they were saying, Pastor.
I mean, it was bad. Basically, we're done with Palestine. And I understand their, their sentiments that they've expressed. Like, we have problems here with water. We have problems with food. They're completely oppressed people. And they're just sick of those false narratives. And I also read a statistic not long ago, and it eludes me. I didn't plan on bringing this up, that in the Gaza Strip, they have put enough concrete under the ground, building terror tunnels, that you could build the Empire State Building like 12 times.
Something like that.
I don't know if the ratio that I just mentioned is correct, but for our folks listening, what Jonathan is trying to say is these people are almost beyond help, because all the funding that goes to them is completely controlled by Hamas.
Correct.
And you correct me if I'm wrong in saying this, and I read this as well. When it comes to the Palestinians in Gaza, which I really don't believe there's such a thing as a Palestinian, and I don't believe
my father was a Palestinian.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, he was a Jewish boy born in British Mandate Palestine in 1937, and the British referred to the Jewish population as Palestinian. The name Palestinian went away in 1948 when Israel declared independence, and didn't resurface until the year I was born.
Wow. Incredible. But But one thing that people, I think, need to realize about Hamas is they were elected. They're a governmental type agency in the Gaza Strip.
Yes and no. The Hamas in the last parliamentary election that the Palestinian Authority had, and we're going back about 2 decades, or I think. Don't quote me on that, but it's a long time. There have not been elections in a very long time. Hamas did get more parliamentary seats for what's called the Palestinian Authority, but they were not in control of the Palestinian Authority government. Why Hamas is in charge of Gaza now is because after Israel withdrew everything, even disinterred Jewish bodies from Jewish communities in 2005, it was either 6 or 7 that they had their own bloody revolution, and Hamas killed, butchered, and kicked out any remnant of the PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, another terrorist organization that basically governs the Palestinian Authority. So Hamas wasn't elected any more than the Taliban was elected to govern Afghanistan now.
Okay. So they just control the Gaza Strip by force.
Correct. If and bloody force. They threw people off the top of tall apartment buildings and dragged their what they call their enemies on the back of pickup trucks. Yeah, it was a vile revolution, and if that weren't to happen, then there would presumably still be a quasi-functioning Palestinian Authority parliament, and Hamas would have more seats in that parliament than the next largest political party / terrorist movement.
So it would be safe to say, though, Jonathan, that a lot of Palestinians approve of Hamas's behavior.
Oh, indeed.
Maybe not, every single person or Arab that lives around Israel approves of it, but many of them do approve of what Hamas has done and what they plan to do. And I would love to remind Americans of this one fact, that the same people that after this barbaric attack that were chanting and celebrating in the streets are the very same people that were chanting and celebrating in the streets after 9/11.
Excellent. Thank you for bringing up that point.
It's the
same enemy.
It's the same sentiments were expressed across the Muslim world. The same sentiments were expressed in the West Bank, in Gaza Strip, in other places where you have majority populations in Israel. After 9/11, I can remember it. I was 15 years old. They took to the streets and celebrated, and I think that's one thing that separates all of us from them, is that none of us are going to celebrate, when they die. We think it's unfortunate.
Correct.
As long as we maintain that, that's what we all have to maintain, as God commands us to maintain. But at the same time, we want to see these terrorists taken out, and we want to see that done with as little human casualty on both ends as possible.
Correct.
And one thing that America's military and the Israeli Defense Force, I think, have always strived to do as an organization, and the technology they developed in their operational tactics, is always to mitigate as many civilian casualties as possible.
Yes, indeed.
And Israel takes the greatest care to do that. And I think that it's important that that's done. But just for a moment, Jonathan, I know you're tired and I'll let you go.
No, I'm great. I love having this conversation.
I have a few more questions. We've primarily put our focus in the South, where Gaza's at, and the communities that were affected by the Hamas attack. For maybe just briefly mention what's going on up north near Lebanon and Syria, where Hezbollah's at.
So on Wednesday night this week, there was something that was, I will tell you in all candor, one of the most frightening things that I've ever experienced in my life. The red alert went off, and I saw, well, if you have it, you saw it. There was something that I'd never seen. We typically see rockets going into this community, that community, and what have you. I had to do a double take. It said something about incoming aircraft, and the frequency and the duration and the breadth of covering communities from the Eastern Galilee up into the Golan Heights, all the way across to the Western Galilee. You looked at one image of red dots, red pins. The whole north of Israel was covered with red pins. Fortunately, thank God, it was a false alarm. And we're going to have probably more false alarms like that in this war as well. I know this. The 300,000 people that Israel called up were not simply meant to guard and go into Gaza, but to secure the northern border. Hezbollah has 150,000 estimated rockets and much longer range missiles with much greater accuracy and a much bigger payload. And if they unleash anything, it has the potential to be widely devastating for all of us. And consequently, which was the topic of the conversation in my podcast about military ethics, will necessarily draw a punishing response to all of Lebanon. In fact, I'm not so proud of it, but I think it was clever and it will be appropriate. Last night, when all this was going on, I tweeted out and put on my Facebook and all the social media, hashtag Lebanon to the ice ages. That will be a necessary thing, and that will unfortunately also draw civilian casualties. At the moment, it's been relatively quiet. They're sitting and watching. I think they're calculating. I think the fact that a U.S. aircraft carrier is coming into the Eastern Mediterranean makes them think twice as to what they want to do. But let's leave no room for mistake here. Hezbollah is an just as evil Islamic terrorist organization that wants the destruction of Israel, the United States, Jews and Christians alike, and if given the opportunity, they will. The only question is how and when to disable them the same way that we now must do that with Hamas.
And I want everybody to be aware of something else when we move to the northern part of Israel. That's very close to the Sea of Galilee.
Sure it is.
Where Jesus lived, where most of his ministry took place.
Correct.
And just a little bit further north from the Sea of Galilee, if you were in Israel, you come to Ramoth Gilead, which is the mountainous country of the north. That's where Elijah, the prophet Elijah, was from. And all that is right next to both the border of Syria and Lebanon. And Syria has threatened to attack our forward operating bases that we have in the region if we get involved. And Hezbollah has threatened to do, I saw where Hezbollah has threatened to do the same thing. We kind of hope and pray that they're that stupid to attack an American forward operating base, which would be met with devastating consequences. And it will also be met with devastating consequences if they decide to attack Israel, because I believe prophetically and feel spiritually that Israel will emerge from this contest, from this war, as a greater Israel rather than a lesser Israel. And I mean that in terms of national unity, and I mean that in terms of the expansion of the land, and I mean that in terms of the destruction of their immediate enemies that have surrounded them in the region. After this attack been made manifest by your prime minister and many others that this can never, under any circumstances, be allowed to happen again. And taking whatever,
as it is, to restore deterrence. Absolutely.
yeah, and to take it to another level that Israel's never taken it to, is in terms of offensive capabilities and the way that they have operated in the past. From what I can read and understand, this is going to be a little drastically different than the way that Israel's operated in the past, because the enemy acted so drastically. And we're going to pray for success in battle as the young men and young women go, and that God protects them and that he moves, miraculously. And we know that he's capable of doing that. But you mentioned to me, without going into any detail about your son, you told me about the latest message that you got from him about him being safe, and how the community where he's at has kind of rallied around all the young soldiers that are there. Can you expand on that any?
It's so inspiring. If people want to read the whole story, I posted an article, which was on townhall.com and a lot of other places, called Stronger Together. And what we found out when he called the other day, he's properly spending most of his time calling his new wife, but he's checking in with us because we're his parents. I won't say what community, but the Army is putting people in different places, both to guard and also that they can't all be in one place, because that's dangerous. And they're not, and if they're going to go in on the ground, they're not ready to go in on the ground, then they don't need to be right on the border at this time. That's my guess. So he called and said we wanted to. He wasn't that far away, and Israel's not such a big country. We could go visit him a little bit, maybe bring him some food. I said we've been getting some money from the Genesis 123 Foundation. Maybe I can go and buy 50, 60, 100 burgers or shawarma or something and bring it to him and his soldiers. And he said, no, they're feeding us really well here, because the community that he's in, and you alluded to it before when you were talking about how people are deployed in their backyard, basically. It's not going overseas. So we all treat them as if they are our sons and daughters when they are in our community. And what happened is they're feeding him. They're feeding all of the soldiers, this community. I got to share another great story about that. Don't let me forget. And he needed to take a shower. Someone invited him to come in and shower in their house. Some woman came and took all his dirty laundry, washed it, dried it, and folded it, and brought it back to him. We've seen that kind of solidarity. By the way, we did that here in our community in 2014 when we had hundreds of soldiers camped out here looking for the 3 boys who had just been kidnapped that summer. And we're seeing all kinds of levels of solidarity. It won't necessarily mean as much to somebody who's not Jewish, but there's a very famous non-kosher restaurant in Tel Aviv that decided to make the whole restaurant kosher in order for them to be able to prepare food for all of the soldiers, to honor every Jewish soldier, that they would be able to eat the food. That's incredible. And that's what we're seeing.
Absolutely. So it's a time of great national unity, and we don't want to brag about what we've been able to do, but our church has been able to help, and we helped immediately. And there's some other people that we're helping with too. We have some friends in the north that we're helping with. They needed some kits to turn pistols into rifles, and my mother and father got right on that. And This is unprecedented, but can you describe what is the most urgent need, Jonathan?
Love and prayers. When Saturday night we were devastated, and I did a video and announced that we're starting an emergency campaign. And I listed several areas. I know what the needs are. I listed several areas, and I came out with a statement. And you know me well enough. That's one of the reasons that we're as close as we are. My integrity. I said, I'm not going to make a commitment where the money's going yet, because I want to see where the actual real need is.
Right.
And I don't want to be in the place of funding things that aren't needed. I don't want to be funding things where they're getting so much money they don't know what to do with it. And in the course of the next, I would say, 24 hours, my thought processes shifted. We heard from my son, for instance, that his whole reserve unit didn't have ceramic bulletproof vests, and someone in that unit is trying to procure them for them. There's been a lot of people trying to procure all kinds of military equipment like this. I have now the right way of delivering it, and so we're going to be doing that. But soldiers need, think about it. My son came home for 10 minutes and packed up what he could for 10 minutes. I don't even think he knew the gravity of what he was going into.
Right.
He doesn't have clean underwear. He forgot his heavy socks. So people are talking about buying underwear and socks, hygienic supplies for men and women, because they're not all living in the places where they can go and get showers. Some of them are very well fed. Some of them are in places where they're not well fed. I just got a text yesterday, I think, or maybe today, that there have been these 40 the word is escaping me, high level combat, elite combat forces stationed somewhere I can't say. They haven't had a hot meal since Saturday. That was yesterday or today. Phone chargers. Someone said to me, we need to give them phone chargers, because if they have their phones, they have to have battery for the 3 minutes that they're able to call home and say, I'm okay. Other kinds of things that are going on like that. So we've committed that one of the pillars of our emergency campaign is to support the soldiers, and there are many more of them now.
And that's,
the supply line. Go ahead.
I think that's rightfully so, Jonathan, because in this situation, it being unprecedented, you could do work with any other type of organization in Israel or anything that's, Holocaust survivors, kids, and all that's great. I'm not knocking that. But in this situation, it doesn't matter, because if it doesn't happen with the Army, it's not going to happen anywhere else.
Correct. And anyone saying that we're doing so and so, I heard a horrible report. Some good, well-intended people brought a plane load of supplies. But here's a funny story. You'll get it. The vests that they brought are black vests. They don't meet military requirements here because Hamas wears black vests. So we can't use them. So that all has to be coordinated with the Army, and we're coordinating with the right people. I'm not gonna. I'd rather lose some money a little bit and give them a little too much money to buy a little too much equipment than see more graves dug. So that's one of the pillars. Sure. The other, in community, you've not been to my home yet, but you know where we live and what we're surrounded by, and the communities near Gaza. There are a lot of first responder teams, military trained first responders, and they need rapid response kits that they can treat any emergency. They're not assault units. If someone gets hurt, we're going to treat it. They have a stretcher that folds up into the palm of your hands together. We've provided several of those in the region where we live because we're surrounded by Palestinian Arabs, and you never know if one day it's going to be their turn to launch an attack on us, literally. So we're doing that, and thermal drones, civilian security. And the third point, you just mentioned kids. I have a soft spot for kids. I have 6 of them. I have 3 grandchildren. The children are our future, and we've been, I don't know if I ever shared this with you, but we've been supporting a facility in Sderot, which is the city next to Gaza, the closest city next to Gaza, that for probably 2 decades has been beleaguered the most by rocket fire. And kids there today, any child under 20 doesn't remember a day in their life that they haven't lived either under rocket fire or the threat of it. And so if you're coming from a home where your parents don't have the skills, you have that in your community. Every community has people who biologically can become parents, but emotionally are not capable of giving to their children everything that they deserve. They may give everything that they can, but not everything that they deserve. So they're coming from homes that are unsafe, living in a community that's unsafe, and now their whole country is unsafe. So we on Sunday, Sunday morning, I texted my contact there, first of all, to ask how they were. Second of all, ask what they needed. I had done a video with them a few months ago, which I've now posted, and to give an idea of what the needs were, even in a non-war time. Now it's on steroids. And I have to tell you, it scared me to no end that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday passed, and I didn't hear from her. I didn't know if she was dead. I didn't know if her husband was dead, if kids were dead. I didn't know what was going on. On Thursday, I heard from her and I cried. I wept. I couldn't control it because for all the reasons. And so she and her family, first of all, thank God, are okay. But she and her children went to live at her mother's house further away so they wouldn't be in the rocket fire. I'm not saying that, and we're going to support them, and I pray that we'll have enough money to support them with at least one or two therapies that they provide or new therapies that they don't provide for a year. And those are not the only needs. There are many other needs. I said on our webinar that I did on Sunday night, I listed several items before I had boiled it down to the three, and I listed several. And I said, folks, if we had $1 million for each of these, it still wouldn't be enough. But so I don't want to say that those are the biggest needs, because I think that might be dishonest of me, and I don't want to judge. I don't want to rank them. I want to tell you, and to you personally, and your church, and everyone in your ministry who's contributed, or anyone who will, I'm working very strategically to make sure that every dollar we get goes directly to where we can make the biggest impact in those areas. And I'll tell you this, if something new comes up that we can affect, that we can do and make an impact, and that I can guarantee with integrity that is really going to provide the service that they need, then of course I'll consider funding that too. It's all a matter of how much money we have.
One thing that I want everybody to know that's watching is that I was the one that requested this interview. Jonathan did not request it. I asked him. I asked him for your benefit because I knew that at any time I could speak with him and, gain more profounder understanding about the realities on the ground in Israel. But I also thought it would be good to share it with our fellowship and the people that are inside of our viewing audience, that they could have a greater understanding right from someone that's in Israel and knowing what's going on. But Jonathan and I, neither one did this interview to raise money.
No.
That wasn't our intention. And before we did the interview, we spoke. And Jonathan is a person of integrity, and I try to be a person of integrity as well. And one thing that we do want to do is handle this appropriately, because this has been a tragedy of literally biblical proportions.
Correct.
And we wouldn't want to stand on the graves of these victims just to raise money. That's not what this is about. This is about there's an urgent need. There's a complete mobilization to war. An entire country is at war. You all that have listened to this have heard the situation with his daughters. They're not going to work. The one objective of every Jew in Israel right now, and every Jew, what we're seeing around the world, is to win this war.
Well, by the way, I want to correct you again, Pastor.
Okay.
It's not just Jews, Christian friends like you.
Absolutely.
Who are standing with us. There's no daylight and I don't want to. We are the Jewish state. God gave this land to the Jewish people, but you
Absolutely.
are no less part of us. You are no less
Absolutely.
part of us.
The Apostle Paul, Jonathan, in the letter that he wrote to the church that was in Ephesus at Asia Minor, he said, those that were one time strangers, aliens from the covenants of promise, meaning the covenants of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, and David. He said, now you've been made nigh by the blood of Jesus. He says this middle wall of partition that was in the Herodian temple that separated Jew and Gentile has now been broken down. And he said, inside of Christ, both Jew and Gentile have been joined together inside of one person. And that's what we believe as a church, that though by our ancestry and genetics we're separated, Jesus of the tribe of Judah, lineage of David, he brought us together and made us all nigh. So we, now we share a common ancestry as the people that love God and hold him dear. And now we have a common objective, which is to bring Israel through this and to do what is needed. And most of all, like Jonathan said, I asked him what's most needed, and he said, your love and prayers, and you have that.
Yeah.
But what do we need to do? Listen, if you're watching this and you want to contribute, you've heard it. Jonathan has my complete trust. Not only my complete trust, he has the complete trust of my mother and father. So my mother took the last phase of her cancer treatment, and Jonathan saw my mother and father longer in August, the month of August, than I did because I had to stay here.
Is that right?
Yeah. So Jonathan went and visited my mom and dad while he was in Nashville at speaking engagements. My mom was in Nashville taking treatments, and I get this surprise picture from him with my mom and dad. And I was like, what in the world is going on? And of course, mom's treatments worked out great.
Thank
And
God.
And she's doing very well. But if you want to give, you don't have to send it to us. I mean, our church has already given. We plan to give more. You can go to the Genesis 123 Foundation, Google it. You have portals for giving. You all are listening to the president, the proprietor, the founder, the person that makes all the decisions. He will get your money. As he said, he wants to get every dollar to the right place. And it's a fluid situation. There may arise a need that none of us can foresee. Only God can foresee it and knows what that
and it would
need
be dishonest of me to say that we're doing this and only that, because I have to have the trust of everybody who donates even a dollar. I had a woman call me the other night from California who apologized for only donating $3.44. And I said, no, every dollar does matter, number one. And number two, you've just given me the opportunity to thank you in person. And that's how I am.
And we don't know what level of sacrifice that was for her to give $3.44.
Correct.
I believe God will honor it and God will bless it. And what we're trying to get across is to our listeners, I want to get this point across. Here you have someone who is in Israel, whose friend, son-in-law could call and say, hey, father, hey, friend, hey, neighbor, this need has popped up. We need this, and we don't even know what it is right now. What need might be food. It could be anything. Your son calls and said, hey, Dad, we need more magazines. We need flashlights. We need, boots, socks, whatever it may be. We have an active source of intelligence on the ground that can relay that intelligence to us and meet the need.
Can I share something with you to magnify that point? Today, it's hard being in this situation. I've never been in a war like this. And I've been throwing myself, it's 1:15 in the morning, all hours of the day and night this is my defense. I don't have a gun. I don't drive a tank. And I joke that I lost my F-16 pilot's license some years ago. So this is my weapon. my words, my love, my networking and creating understanding and support. And I'm not thinking clearly all the time. I know I'm not. But today I just had a very powerful realization when my daughter told me that she's been basically laid off where she works. My other daughter, who's a physical therapist, the one with the three little kids, my other daughter who's a dance instructor and going for her finishing her master's in dance therapy, and my son and daughter-in-law who are supposed to start in 2 days from now. They're supposed to start their university life together in their own apartment, and nobody knows if there won't be university beginning and regular. And I say all of this because I realize, and my son-in-law is not working, and someone else told me they're not. I don't know how families are going to get through this financially. And I'm not going to go giving my own children money so they can pay their bills, but I'm just with this profound awareness that there's going to be tremendous financial suffering compounding the emotional suffering, which is going to compound it
even more. Yeah.
We have to be a bit. Look, please God, someone will see this or another interview or another thing and give me $1 million, $5 million, $100,000. I don't care. Not me, and it's not me personally. And that I can make an even deeper, wider impact. But I'm aware of the fact that goodness, if I could figure out a legal way to be able to, maybe it's just buying 1,000 coupons, gift cards for 1,000 shekels each and give them out to families where the husbands are called up and they're not working. That's going to help. But I don't know.
Well, as the situation develops, I'm going to pray that more and more comes in. And as I said before, if anybody's watching this, you don't have to contact me to help Jonathan. You can contact him directly. And I'm very careful when I say this, because there's a way that I don't think that pastors need to be perceived, because we see so much of it in America. But I will say this: if you want to be blessed, bless Israel. If you want God to give to you, give to Israel. This is the only thing that I will say concerning money. If you want to be financially blessed, give to Israel. I've never seen God fail to bless people when they bless Israel, his people. That's the name of the organization. I will bless them that bless thee. I will curse them that curse thee. That goes both ways. And we've done our best to bless, in this time and in other times, and God has always blessed our church for it. And I pray that many others do that. So I think we have everything that we need. And I want to thank you personally, Jonathan, for taking the time out of your night. I mean, midnight going into 1 o'clock in the morning, to speak with us and to speak with our audience. But just know that you'll be in our prayers and you'll be in our thoughts. And if you had anything you want to add before we conclude, please feel free.
Yes. It's my delight and it's my privilege, and I will give up any number of sleepless nights for you, Pastor Boyd. And no, I'm not joking. What you do is important and it makes a difference, and I honor that on a global basis, and I'm grateful for it on a personal basis, and I'm grateful for it on behalf of all of our people who don't yet know you, but it's extraordinary, and so this is no sacrifice. This is a privilege to be able to sit here with you today.
I represent a lot. I'm the representative of a large group of people at our church. Yes. Both living and dead, past and future, generations to come, that have stood behind Israel and supported Israel. And I'm glad to represent those people and to represent those Christians and to be able to have this conversation. And this won't be the last conversation, hopefully, that we have. Unfortunately, from everything that we read and see, this war, though I believe Israel will be victorious, we have no idea how long. These battles,
or at what cost,
or at what cost,
or at what cost,
or at what cost of life and property.
Correct.
This war could take. So this might be a correspondence that we have with one another, maybe perhaps on a regular basis, perhaps not this long, perhaps maybe not even this short. We don't know. But
perhaps not in the middle of the night.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jonathan will definitely keep us updated. And I want, with your permission, Jonathan, I would like to open it up to, if anyone has any questions for you and they want to email those questions to the church or email them to you personally. I don't think you would mind questions.
I welcome that, but I want to be honest, because I'm having a hard time keeping up with all of the emails and the text messages and Facebook messages with people just from my distant past saying, I'm praying and I'm thinking about you. What can we do?
Yeah.
I welcome it. I try to answer, but I don't want people to expect that they're going to get an immediate, short term, quick, personal answer. I do want to note this, that you've been very gracious to say it, if people want to donate directly to Genesis 123, don't do it through the general website, and you can get information and be in touch by email through there. That's genesis123.co. But the unique link that we have where I can track the donations for this campaign is love.genesis123.co. And the reason I mention that,
say that one more time.
Love.genesis123.co. And of course, people are invited to donate their $3.44 or whatever it is, but they're also given the opportunity to write their own personal prayer or blessing or words of encouragement to a soldier, to a woman whose husband is now called up and don't know when she's going to see, to the children of such a couple, to somebody who's out of work, to anyone in Israel. And I'm committed to buy as many reams of paper and print them over and over and over and over again and give them out to everybody so that love is magnified.
That's amazing. That is amazing. And I hope, like I said, I hope people respond to this. And I believe that they will. And this is just so important. I wish we were having this conversation about, what the Feast of Tabernacle means to Orthodox Jews in Israel. I really do. Or, what Passover, we could have that conversation in the spring, what that means, how your family approaches that. I think, but let's
hope we can have this conversation for Hanukkah.
Absolutely.
That's in 2 months.
Absolutely. I hope that we can. And I hope it's that quick, and I hope it's that effective. As a matter of fact, I hope God miraculously intervenes, and maybe the whole world will come to the understanding that God still keeps Israel and they're still his people. And we pray for that to happen, that not one soldier is lost. And
amen.
I know that may not be the reality, it usually never is, but we can pray that.
God doesn't always answer our prayers the way we want, but he's listening.
So before we conclude, Jonathan, if it's okay with you, I would like to pray.
Please.
And thank God for the opportunity that we've had.
Yes.
Father, we come before you with thanksgiving, and we become before your throne of mercy and grace. And right now we lift up your people, Israel, and we know that you keep them. And Father, we hope that we can say that the everlasting gates have opened up and the King of glory has come in, and the world will ask, who is the King of glory? And we can say, the Lord, mighty in battle. And we believe that you can be with these young men and women as they go forth to fight. You can protect them. and you can give them strength and courage. For Father, for those that have passed and are suffering and the tremendous loss of life, we pray that you comfort and you bless as only you can bless, and that you do as only you can do. And Father, Jonathan, I hope we can come back to this place and in unity give you praise and give you glory for all that you have done. It's through Jesus we pray. Amen.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. Till the next time, my friend, we will see you again.
I'm on board.